Looking at the north end of the first opening, this is the Will Morris photograph. We're gonna be taking a look. We're gonna see that the columns between 8 and 13 are missing. Here we see that the exterior facade between columns 8 and 13 is completely absent. What we see here is that you can see column 9AA that is kind of bent and visible within the smoke. Column 10, 11, and 12 are clearly missing. Column 13 is really strongly obscured by smoke. So we can see that these columns are missing in this area. I want to take a look at the area directly under the windows between columns 11 and 12 and 12 and 13. You can see that there's no floor slab or beam going across the front. Something has actually impacted and done a lot more damage. As we'll see later, the wing would have been entirely under the second floor slab there, so the only thing that could have been sticking up above to actually do damage at that height would have been the tail section, and that would be because the plane had done some rotation as it was approaching the last 100 feet of the wall or so, which we'll talk about later. Now taking a closer look at the north end opening. This is taken approximately perpendicular, and you can barely see column 9AA, and you can also see some of the tree branches that were present. Here's a much better view of column 9AA, column 9 in the back, and the steel tube, which is the 4x4 window support frame, and you can see that it's got the plates on it, and they're actually rotated about 90 degrees from where they had originally been. Column 9AA has no remaining columns to its right. They're all gone, and you can see column 9AA is kind of bowed again, connected to the top, connected to the bottom, but bowed in the middle. And the steel tube to the right, in this particular picture, you can see the stubs from where they had cut off the fingers during the cleanup. We'll now be taking a look at the hanging remnants of column 16. The hanging remnants of the column 16, as well as 15 and 17, are hanging from the second floor. This is what the photo that's been out for a long time with identification colors. As I mentioned before, some people have argued that the columns were in fact arising from the ground slab angled up, but if you were to try to draw kind of lines of where they would originate, they would originate right underneath the windows, the middle of the windows, and that's not an appropriate place for the columns. Columns would line up one on top of the other, as shown in column 18. That's where they would have been. So they would not begin on the ground floor halfway, midway through a window, and then change once they moved over to the windows to a different orientation. Again, we have a picture from the right showing column 16 hanging. You can see the spool. As we move to the next photo, you'll see the spool change in perspective, but the column 16 will still remain attached to the ceiling, or to the second floor. So now you can see that we moved probably about 20 or 30 degrees to the left, and we can still see that it's hanging. If we go to the left-hand side, looking at some videos that were where they actually were able to capture this, you can still see that from the opposite side, you can see that they're still attached to the second floor, and that they're bent inwards, not bent outwards. Here's another viewpoint of the same column 16. again, hanging from the second floor slab, not coming up from the floor slab, ground slab. And here's another view of it hanging from the second floor. At any rate, it should be clear that they're hanging, they're not jutting out from the ground slab, because you can see them from a range of about 120 degrees difference, and they all are attached to the second floor slab. They're clearly hanging. And by the way, the spool in the front that's labeled will ultimately, when the facade, when the floors collapse, that'll get knocked over sideways. Hard to keep all the orientation right, because things have changed. Things change over the course of the collapse. In the post-collapse image, you can see the tree stump, and you can see the wire spool had gotten knocked over. Another photo of the splintered tree stump. Now we'll take a look at the hole in the second floor. The opening in the second floor appears like a sheet of the wall fell, and because of the way that it was constructed, it's not unreasonable to have the two window frames in this place that exhibited or experienced the greatest impact to have had some greater damage, and just potentially the two window frames just fell away. One of the things that can possibly explain how this area centered on column 14, between column 13 and column 15, how it would have fallen away as a single entity. The force of the tree that had been in front of column 16, being severed, slamming into the wall, has the potential to create a lot of additional local damage. That appears to be what we're actually looking at when we see this opening on the second floor. Chapter 4, the earring exterior wall. We have our table of contents. If you want to jump to another section, feel free to. Go to the slide numbers shown on the right. And this is for chapters 9 through 17. The earring exterior wall is frequently a point of confusion. The wall present on 9/11 is frequently referred to as massive and blast resistant. Little detailed analysis of the wall is available in 9/11 Truth Circles. Many who speak about the Pentagon repeat the assertions of steel reinforced concrete. There is also no interior earring wall. It's all continuous from the exterior earring wall to the interior C-ring wall. Those are the only two walls that are present between where the plane came in and where parts of it left. We're going to review the construction prior to 9/11, and it shows a modest wall mass, potentially 75 tons for a 100-foot span, as compared to an impacting 100-ton aircraft. The connections of the wall to the upper and lower slab is relatively weak. The through-bolt connections are done with 3/4-inch bolts, about 12 bolts per section between columns. The ground floor slab has 4x4 steel tubes that are inset into the ground slab. Many people have repeated, as I used to do, that the Pentagon walls were made of concrete, bricks, and limestone, and that they were massive, and that is in fact not how these walls were built, and we'll go through that in some detail here. After 9/11, the next generation of replacement walls appear to be much more massive than what you saw here. Here's kind of a sketch of what they look like. Wedge 1's outer wall was reconstructed with these blast-resistant windows to withstand a terrorist attack, specifically from bomb blast and high-force lateral impacts, like the Khobar Tower bombing in Saudi Arabia in the 1990s, in which most people were killed by flying glass. and so they wanted to protect the occupants from flying glass, which is how they developed the design criteria for the walls. In the article Retrofitting the Pentagon for Blast Resistance by Michael N. Biscott, P.E., and Keith A. Almoni, they say that there was no reinforced concrete wall backing. The idea of supporting the brick infill walls with a reinforced concrete wall backing was rejected as a typical approach because of the Pentagon's excessive fenestration, although this design was accepted for blank wall panels with no window openings. The selected approach was to use vertical tubes, giving new blast protection, and then giving blast protection to the infill walls. On the third and fourth floors, they welded the tubes to long, narrow plates running along the floor and the ceiling. These plates connected to their counterparts on the floors above and below with through bolts using the 3/4 inch diameter A36 threaded rods. On the first floor, because the first floor is a slab on a grade, connecting the tubes to the floor by through bolting would not work, and since the bolts could not take the calculated tensile shear forces, a different approach was required. A core drilled hole into the slab on grade was used to accommodate the steel tube bottom, so the tubes would bear horizontally against the floor through the bearing plate. So I drilled holes and they inset it. And these were blast-resistant windows. The outer wall was reinforced with structural steel tubing to increase the lateral stability and provide support to the new blast-resistant windows. Now let's look at some construction photos from before 11. This is on the second or higher floor. What you can see, because you got the bolts going through down to the bottom. So what you see here is there's about a dozen bolts between each of the window frames, and you can see the 4x4 steel tubes and the blast resistant windows and the fingers holding them up. And the white stuff at the bottom is Kevlar for safety from blast-related brick and shrapnel, and of course you can bolts. From a slightly different perspective, we see the blast-resistant windows, the 4x4 tubes, and the fingers, and we've got the Kevlar. The bolted connections to the floor and ceiling are done through the steel rail, and the tubes were welded to that. The frames were then bolted into place, welded at the header. You got the through bolts. So there's a lot of details in some of the construction photos. Not a lot of them, but there's enough to see what was done to make the walls blast resistant and how they were constructed. Post 9/11 event photographs show the same thing. This is again a second floor window. You can see that the glass had kind of melted here. The steel frame is there, highlighted. You can see the fingers that are still holding the window frame in place, and you can see the Kevlar as the material had been destroyed in front of it. Here's another one that where we have fiberglass insulation in front of the Kevlar, and you can see the brick infill to the side of the side of the steel tubes. Here you can see in the post-event photos, you can see the steel frame tubes are visible to the left of column 8AA, which is to the left. You can see the window is in place, and the fingers that are holding it up that are connected to the 4x4. And you can see to the right of column 9AA, you can see that the fingers are bent. They are so the window has actually been rotated slightly as the wall was destroyed, and as the steel frame and column 9A slowed down, decelerated the wings. And so we got these photos here. If we go take a look at the window to the left of column 3, you can see the fingers holding the blast-resistant window up also. So I just kind of zoomed in. Just wanted to show those. Just another photo of the window at column 3. Column 9A, an adjacent steel window frame tube. During the early stages of the cleanup, we'll be seeing this photo a little bit more. And again, this speaks volumes to the dynamics that were going on at this location, because the wing did not go through, but did significant damage to both column 9AA and the adjacent steel tube. Again, another picture of the same things. We have column 9A. You can see actually connected to the top and the bottom and bent. You can see that it was had been inset, and it's unclear just how this is actually twisted, but this is the best photo I have of the connection of the steel tube to the windows, to the concrete slab. So let's take a look at the collapsed wall again. So what's visible of what we just saw in the post-collapse wall photos? All the components of the wall are clearly visible in this post-collapse, these post-collapse photos. The limestone exterior sheathing, the bricks, supporting columns, steel window frame, supports, blast-resistant windows. We've seen this picture before. We've got the limestone facing, the brick underneath. We have this 4-inch steel tubes, and we have the blast-resistant windows that you can now see in the collapse. Again, we have the blast-resistant windows, the steel frame tubes. We have the limestone cornices, which are the very large blocks, and the shattered tree stumps. Their columns that have fallen or been destroyed are a different color than the limestone. So here I'm pointing out that the steel frames were not continuous between the floors. What you see here is the kind of the top yellow arrow pointing to the lower part of a window. There's a gap in the steel in that area, and that's where there would have been through bolts with a piece of the slab in between them. We're going to kind of zoom in to a different area, and you can see the through bolts connecting the different pieces. And there's many other areas in the wall that you can look at and see these through bolts because the concrete has fallen away. Here's another example of the through bolts going through the slab. Chapter 5, the tree at column 16. We have our table of contents. If you want to jump to another section, feel free to. Go to the slide numbers shown on the right. And this is for chapters 9 through 17. The tree at column 16 is a large identifiable object, and the movement of a large identifiable object is subject to the laws of physics. What you'll see is that the trunk is severed, a shattered tree stump remains, tree branches will be seen at the north end of the impact area. Photographs taken after the event document the presence of the lower tree trunk, and the lower tree trunk was kicked about 100 feet northward. The displacement of the tree above the stump can only be explained by a large plane impact. It indicates a large momentum force from the south. That movement can't be explained by any of the other theories. It can't be explained by a cruise missile into the building. It can't be explained by an exploding drone or other plane. It can't be explained by pre-planted explosives, either inside or outside. It can't be explained by dropped bombs, and is unexplainable by the North of Sitco flight path because it's the wrong angle to knock the lower tree 100 feet northward. Shortly before 9/11, you can see the tree in front of column 16. It's just to the left of it. From the satellite photograph on Friday, September 7th, you can see that the tree at column 16 was present. The stump was ultimately shattered. It wasn't cut with a chainsaw, so it's indicating that it was actually severed by some large momentum event. In the images to the right, you can see the tree at column 26 that's been highlighted. You can see where the tree at column 16 is, and we can see that the trees in front of the firehouse are both highlighted there. This is the photograph of the west wall before 9/11, and you can see the tree in front of column 16 very clearly. After the 9/11 event, the tree vanishes without a comment. In reviewing years of the discussions about the Pentagon, only once was the stump of the tree at column 16 mentioned that I ever ran across, with no follow-up discussion about where the tree went. Michael Wilson's video has a tree fading into oblivion. Here the plane approaches the tree at column 16. The plane begins to knock the tree forward. The tree fades away in the video and from any discussions. Another example of the tree at column 16 fading out of the Pentagon's 9/11 history, even though it's important. Again, here's a picture of the tree stump in front of column 16. You can clearly see that it's not part of the column. It's sticking up out of the ground, and it's shattered, and we've seen it in the post-collapse wall. We've seen it from different angles. It's definitely the tree stump. Here's the post-collapse wall. You can see it in kind of living colors, so to speak, in how it is shattered from a different angle than we've seen before. So the probable sequence for the tree impact and movement is as follows. The plane would have come from the southwest. The leading main wing spar between the engine and the fuselage is the most likely impacting mass. The tree trunk was whacked and moved further north, traveling through the fuselage, of course. There's no way to get the tree moving this way without it impacting the plane and possibly causing a fair amount of the debris, larger debris, to actually be loosened and distributed on the lawn later on. The momentum of the tree trunk pulls the tree northward without a force to the top of the tree. The northward impact to the lower trunk would drag the entire tree northward with the top trailing. The severed tree trunk lands in the area between columns 5 and 8. The top tree branches are seen as far south as columns 10 or 11 in the burning photo, which we'll look at here. The tree branches seen at the north end of the impact area have been overlooked by 9/11 Pentagon analysts. I remember seeing them and saying, gee, what are these? Where'd they come from? I have no idea. It took me for a long time until I had seen the stump and was able to begin asking the questions, could this be, in fact, a tree? Their presence had been unexplained previously. Where did they come from? How did they get there? Some hypothesized that they were rebar from the columns that were exploded outward. And this is one of the examples of some discussion about them, but that doesn't seem to be supportable by the increased analysis. In this photograph to the left of the alleged impact point, which is where the red dot is a little more difficult to see, but what is remaining of the columns, of the outer columns of the west wedge, are actually bowed out. So they're argued to be rebar that's bowed outward from internal explosions, but in fact they're tree branches. So we'll take a look at this view from the north side of the impact area. We'll zoom on it again, and we'll see the close-up of the tree branches. You can see that they have this, what you would expect to be the shape of tree branches, and you can see column 9AA that's bowed inward at the in the smoky area. After the fire, we can still see the branches from the tree rising up here, and again you can see column 9AA. I like column 9AA. It tells an awful lot about what actually happened. The tree branches seen here during it's still kind of smoky as the building's still burning, but this area has been, the fire's been basically put out. Tree branches are seen as far south as about column 11. Here's another view of the tree branches, kind of from a more direct, straight-on perspective during the event. Here's another view of the tree branches. Again, you can see column 9AA to the right. You can see the tree branches in the foreground, and then you can see some tree branches along the base of the building, and you can see that they're kind of angled up. So now we'll take a look at the tree trunk between columns 7 and 8. During the firefighting period, you can actually see them. We've got the tree trunk that's in this little square that we'll zoom in on, and you can see the tree trunk there. It's something has landed on top of it, and I've identified this as being between or beneath the window that's between columns 5 and 6. You can see some of the branches, and you can see the trunk. As the area is being cleaned up, this you can see this image here of the trunk that has been limbed on the afternoon of 9/11. And here's a zoom in of the trunk, and from a point of view. Here's another one, and one of the other reasons that you can see that there was a tree is there's all this tree debris on the Pentagon lawn. Here are tree branches among the debris. Pentagon lawn is littered with this tree debris, and it's consistent with the tree at column 16 being whacked and severely damaged, and then the branches flying out in this direction. Although the contention is that they could not fly by themselves, they had to be entrained in a trailing air mass that transported them this distance. So this is on the far side of the heliport landing pad. This is to the right of the heliport landing pad, but you can see a larger branch with the leaves still on the branches. Littered debris includes a lot of vegetation from this tree at column 16. 2 surviving trees near the heliport fire tower. There's concern that the thing that was hanging down just below here, actually to the right of this, was the branch from the tree that was here, but this particular branch is still hanging, and we saw that and it's really far too short, and it's actually in the wrong place for this to have been the thing that ultimately was photographed laying down under the large object. So the next chapter we're going to deal with is the C-ring exit hole. We have our table of contents. If you want to jump to another section, feel free to. Go to the slide numbers shown on the right. And this is for chapters 9 through 17. The hole in the C-ring of wedge 2 resulted from the plane impact. The debris outside the C-ring exit hole contained some aircraft parts, Pentagon office material, and, as a number of people had pointed out, body parts. Much conjecture is circulated regarding what caused the opening. Conjecture claims are that it's a perfectly round hole, it was created by shaped charges, claim that there was no path for material to travel between the E-ring entrance and the C-ring exit. However, a detailed review shows that there are several clear paths that exist through the columns. The C-ring wall in wedge 2 was only 2 bricks thick. No significant bracing of the wall is apparent. What we see here is wedge 1 was rebuilt to withstand a blast. It has blast resistant design, and work on wedge 2 had not yet begun. This sub-highlighted the impact area, and if you go to the bottom right hand side, you can see the C-ring exit hole is between columns 5-0 and 7-0 in wedge 2. And from this point of view, you can also see that in the area where the C-ring exit hole, there are 4 rows of windows, and it is in the wall below that. So there's 5 floors there. And if you look at the other areas between the E and D rings and D and C rings, there's only 3 rings, and you can see that also between the A and B rings. That's where the interior area is 2 floors high, as opposed to the 5-floor high in the rest of the Pentagon in these ring things. The ASCE report depicts columns larger than they actually are, and they were done so that the color coding that they used to identify the status was appropriate. Because they were shown as much larger, there was no clear path from the impact point to the exit hole. But if you corrected it for size, then there would be appropriate paths, and we'll be going through those. The estimated width of the paths shown with the impaired columns is that there are 3 paths. One's 2.5 feet, another one that's 2.3 feet, and another one that's 1.1 feet that goes through the columns at a 50-degree angle. And this is consistent, and then the debris is continuing out at about the same angle as the internal path. We'll be looking at some inside photos, just kind of give some verification of what we're looking at here. So we have the angle of a photograph that we're going to take a look at, standing between or shooting between columns 3M and 3N towards the exit hole. You can see column 5N in the photo, and so you can see column 3M and 3N in the foreground. Column 5N seems to be really in bad shape compared to 3N and 3M, and then you can see the exit hole. There's some activity going on out there. Again, just kind of a close-up of that. Here's another view of the exit hole from the interior, a different time. So let's go look at the validation of the width. One inside the Pentagon photograph can be used for validation of the estimates used here. Taken between columns 3M and 3N, looking towards the C-ring exit hole at approximately the angle of the plane debris path, the objects established a relative size with certainty. We have a wheelbarrow that's about 20 inches wide. Column 3N is 21 inches. So the photo is taken at this same angle between these columns. We estimate that it's about the width of the path there is about 6 feet from what you'd be able to see in your view. And what we see here is that the wheelbarrow is about 20 inches. The width of the field that you're able to see here is about 6.3 feet, and that seems to be pretty reasonable. So the graphical analysis seems to hold up. The exit hole photos as seen in the A&E drive. This is one of the early photos with the smoke rising from the exit hole. A lot of material that's in there. Here, the debris path, I've highlighted the debris path that's going out, continuing out at an angle. If it had been created with internally placed explosives, the angle would have typically, you would expect it to be much more distributed in all directions, but that's not the direction that the material is largely been traveling at. So it's consistent with the internal path of about 50 degrees. Here's another early photograph of the exit hole. The debris outside has many bricks laying near the wall, suggesting that it just kind of crumbled away. We can see interior plastic wire mesh wall plaster wasn't destroyed. We'll see these a little more closely a little bit later, and you can see that there's some plumbing pipes that have got bends in them. Not severed, not destroyed, but they have bends. There's some large parts outside with they've got some substantial mass. We'll see a few of the wheel pieces. We've got a tire. The photos are unfortunately not as good as you'd like. Here we can see the tire again. We can see the landing gear parts. So we can see them from different perspectives. Here we can see the tire. It appears to be kind of laying in a deep pool of water in this particular photo here. And then you can see the wheel rim off to the left-hand side. That's pretty clear, and it's a large mass that could have just created a lot of the damage to this thin wall that we're going to talk about. The firefighting crews, for example, Dennis Quinn and the crew of Quint 104, there's a lot of things that they've said, and they talk about this opening. They walked closer at the mouth of the third hole. They saw a piece of a wheel and countless shards of wreckage. Lieutenant Colonel Ehrenbrack. I looked left and I saw this huge hole and what looked like a piece of landing gear. The wheel and a piece of landing gear, about 10 feet of landing gear, had just sheared off and punched a huge hole in the C-ring wall and had come to stop against the back side of the B-ring. Later on, talking about the debris outside of the exit hole, it says I was in the back side of the C-ring, but the landing gear was between C and D. It was in the breezeway, what they called between the C-ring and the B-ring. It was a partially punched hole. Yes, it means E, D, C. It had punched a hole through the C-ring wall and stopped against the B-ring wall. And then he continues looking for other survivors. The wall in the C-ring exit hole appears to be 2 layers thick of just regular bricks. The ASCE reports that the first story at the AE drive is brick infill with concrete frame with no windows. The columns on either side of the C-ring exit hole are approximately 20 feet apart. No significant intermediary supports are observed between the columns. Between columns 5-0 and 7-0 in wedge 2. What you see here is the interior plaster wire mesh wall was not destroyed. Pretty clear. Pipe is bent outward, is best explained by momentum event, not explosives. You can also see that the wall is relatively thin by looking at the inset there, where where you can see the width of the wall, 2 bricks thick. Here's some photos of the FEMA Urban Search and Rescue Team. Again, the brick are only here. It's really clear that there's only 2 layers of bricks. Here's another image showing that there's only 2 layers of bricks, and then the wire mesh for the plaster behind it on the inside. Looking back to the impact area, what we see here is that if you look back through the hole, you can see clear through to the other side, the windows on the front of the building, the outer E-ring windows, showing that there's no intermediary walls on the first floor. It's all open area. The internal work lights can be seen. It's not a window, but that's just some work lights inside. If you zoom in, you can actually kind of see things that are on the outside. I don't know what was going on particularly outside. Might actually even be able to figure out what day it was taken by what's outside, whether that's a crane or it's some other other material, other vehicles. The floor plans showing the column cell do exist. This is from the Arlington Fire and Rescue After Action Report, and they have the columns drawn to scale. Much smaller, as you can tell from than the images that we saw from the ASCE report, because these weren't color-coded as dramatically. This is from the Defense Study Series, Pentagon 9/11, and they've got the columns drawn to scale. Again, much smaller than what you saw before. Going through, looking at the internal debris path in a little more detail, the prior analysis showed, this is the older erroneous prior analysis, had shown that no clear path existed for debris from the impact area to the exit hole. Imprecise language such as slurry debris and flowing around the columns was unfortunate. Slurry of debris is not a satisfactory hypothesis for the formation of the C-ring exit hole via momentum. It lacks the impact to knock down even a 2-layer brick wall. Can't explain the tire and landing gear and other debris photographed outside. If it can't explain that, then it would lead to charges of planted evidence. And so had to take a close look at this before you could kind of say that the stuff out there really was part of the plane and wasn't planted. So let's go take a look at how you can actually go through and take a look at the path. The flawed analysis, as I mentioned, had ruled out a possible path because it used the ASCE building performance report without correcting for the column size. The actual column sizes are 21 by 21 inches. And so this is the columns as presented in the ASCE report. I've highlighted them with little squares that are actually the actual size of the actual columns. Once those were located, highlighted them. We've got the C-ring exit hole on the upper left. I removed the ASCE report picture, leaving the columns from the same source but drawn to scale, shown here. And you can see column 14 where the impact would have been, and the exit hole. If you remove the destroyed columns, those were the ones that the ASCE had called pink and red. If you remove the impaired columns, which means they might have been pushed to one side or whatever, this is what we have. Now we're going to go through a graphical analysis of the debris pathways through the columns. If you go from the entry point at column 14 to the C-ring exit hole and try to draw as many lines as you can that go through the columns to avoid actually impacting them, you can see that this is how we got the 2.3, 2.5, and 1.1 foot wide estimated path widths through the impaired columns that are shown here. I've highlighted column 5N, the one that we saw that was severely damaged. The 3N and 3M were not, there to the right of that, were not damaged nearly as much, but the column 5 appeared to have gotten really a lot of damage from a lot of impacting debris. And if you don't have the impaired columns shown, this is what it would look like. Kind of again zooming in, we've got the estimated width of the paths shown, measured as closely as I could get, and showing that these three paths exist through the columns. It explains the projectiles of significant mass traveling through. The three paths are 2.5, 2.3, and 1.1 feet wide. The C-ring exit hole is in the original 1942 era wedge 2 wall, 19 feet wide by 10 feet tall, unreinforced, 2 bricks thick. AE drive debris is consistent with a 50-degree angle. Just kind of giving a plug for American Heat. They were a bunch of firefighter video photographers that came. They actually did they were actually nearby, and they came and photographed in the afternoon of 9/11. And one of their videos is available through interlibrary loan if you're interested in seeing this. And there's not a lot of extra detail in it, but it is another source of original footage. So now let's take a look at the approach path. We're going to be looking at the radar, the FDR, and the plane. We have our table of contents. If you want to jump to another section, feel free to. Go to the slide numbers shown on the right. And this is for chapters 9 through 17. Multiple radar tracking stations corroborate a flight path towards the Pentagon. Then there's a tight right bank until about Bailey's Crossroads at the intersection of routes 7 and 244. It's about 5 miles from the Pentagon. Dulles flight controllers thought it was a military plane due to the fact that there's a 14,000-foot radius turn at 350 miles an hour, things that commercial airliners don't do because it's not safe. Flight data recorder presents effectively the same path. Witnesses report the flight path approaching south of the Sheraton Hotel in the vicinity of Columbia Pike. They placed the plane low in this area. We've got Edward Paik, Terry Morin from the CIT interviews, Don Vignola, Tim Timmerman, Steve Sorty, who are in Pentagon City, Deb Onloff, who was in the Sheraton. Many other witnesses support this plane approach observation. Independent evidence for the plane approach does exist. The independent corroborating data points are the radar and flight data recorder approaching the Arlington area. There's a shadow that was captured in the Citgo video camera. There's a notched tree near Washington Boulevard. There's streetlight damage along the Englands and the others. There's a near terminus impact. That's a generator trailer and the retaining wall. And then, of course, there's a Pentagon facade, all of which aligns and is consistent with the large plane impact. There are many points of recorded physical evidence of the plane approach. First, what we have for some orientation is the VDOT tower, which is in the bottom left-hand corner. It's south of the Navy Annex. We have a tree with a notch, which is highlighted in green along the flight path. The flight path goes right over it. We've got the Citgo station where we're going to have a recorded shadow passing by. We've got the light poles number 1 and 2 that will be touched on. There's also 3 other light poles that are of some significance. And then as we get to the near terminus of the flight path, we have the diesel generator, retaining wall, and ultimately the facade damage also. The radar data for the Pentagon plane is available. We took a look at that. Ultimately also took a look at the flight data recorder. Here are the locations. This shows the different radar sites that were recording the locations and how consistent they were. If you plot them on a Google map, you end up with the blue dots, and so you can see this is the radar traces for the different sites, and you can see it kind of circles around, and then ultimately approaches the Pentagon, which is in the blue box. It's the red Pentagon shaped marker. The Bailey's Crossroad is about where the plane has straightened out. If you plot the flight data recorder, which has many more data points, it's actually remarkably consistent with the shape that we just saw. And I'll be using the flight data recorder points because they are congruent with the data from the radar data, and they have more resolution. We also have an interesting data point that the fellow named Thomas Trapezio, who had an address at 1400 South Barton, he said he was sitting on his deck when a plane flew over him at treetop level or 300 feet or whatever, but it was right over his porch, and this is what he reported. And we'll be taking a look at where exactly that lines up, how well that lines up. The Citizens Investigation Team has an assertion that there was a north of Citgo station flight path. They assert that the plane approached the Pentagon area, passed over the southeastern part of the Navy Annex, passed the Citgo station on the north side, crossed Washington Boulevard, and either impacted the Pentagon approximately perpendicular to the facade, or flew over the Pentagon while witnesses were distracted by detonations of explosives. However, for this to happen, there is the assertion that there is a high-speed 2,000-foot radius turn. This north of Citgo path requires this 2,000-foot radius turn to be taken at 500 miles an hour or thereabouts. Such a tight turn would create high 9+ G forces that an aircraft could not withstand. The same G forces would be required for the CIT's impact hypothesis or the CIT flyover hypothesis, unless, of course, the plane went in a completely different direction, which no one talks about. The path is shown to highlight this asserted tight turn. So this is the CIT's Sergeant Lagasse's Bet My Life North of Citgo path. So we can see that the 14,000-foot radius is the big circle that was captured by the radar. The plane then approached the Pentagon, and in order for it to have followed the radar tracks and then gone north of Citgo and then impacted, there would have to be this 2,000-foot radius turn, which is not practical. Also, in order to get into it, there would have to be about a 2,500-foot radius turn to get it to turn and go over the Navy Annex so that it could be on the north side of the Citgo station. We have made this path go over the 1400 South Barton. If the plane came in from a different direction, for example, came in more or less not anything associated with the radar tracks, but came straight and did not do a 2,000-foot tight radius turn, it would have had to continue further straight north, going effectively over the Washington Monument. That's the direction that it would be heading. So let's take a look at the near Pentagon approach path. And if we take a look at the flight data recorder with the latitude and longitude positions shown, which are the little orange dots there, we see the 1400 South Barton. We also see that we miss the Pentagon, and so we're assuming that this is explainable through instrument drift. And if we were to then make the alignments, the plane would be on the south side of the VDOT tower. It would go effectively over 1400 South Barton, and it would impact the column 14 at these coordinates, these latitude and longitude coordinates. The altitude of the plane was approximately the height of the Sheridan as it passed by, and this was noted by Deb Onliffe, Steve Sorty, and Don Vignola. So that's about the height of the plane as it was approaching this area. Don Vignola's apartment is highlighted there. One of the approach path witnesses is Ed Paik. His recollection was actually about seeing a dark wing go by, not a shadow. What we've done here is we plotted the plane going by, not too far from where his shop would have been. We've highlighted where a shadow would have been if it was traveling. It's ultimately going to go past the Citgo station, but we wanted to just show where this would have been. He could have seen the underpart of the wing. He was, according to the interviews, inside his building, so he could not have seen a lot of detail, but he could have seen the wing go by, basically covered by the sun, but not actually blocking the sun from his point of view. The Citgo security camera captures a shadow of the plane passing by. Talking about that in some more detail, but this is where the shadow would have been, and from the geometry of the sun, the plane path, the shadow suggests the location of the altitude, an altitude of about 75 feet above ground level here. There's a tree notch that provides a lot of information about where the plane was just before it hit the street lamps. The tree near Washington Boulevard that's really interesting. The tree with the notch is right in the middle of the flight path, and you can see light pole number 1 and light pole number 2 are highlighted there. And we'll take a look at this tree as the plane approaches. The tree is along the tree along the flight path exhibits the significant notch after the plane passes by. It would be just before the street lamps were knocked down. Pre and post 9/11 photos verify the 9/11 notch. The presence of the notch seems to define the location of the right engine at this location. Consistent with the street lamp damage, and photos show stripped and cut branch ends. This photo is taken from near the Navy, kind of near the Navy Annex area, and shows the tree notch is quite visible. The tree is basically clearly gotten a haircut. When you zoom in, you can see that there are whitish tinge to the area, suggesting that there are fresh cut branches and stripped bark. Here's another photo taken, and it shows it even clearer, and you can see just how bright those are and how notched it is. The notched tree as seen from the Citgo station on 9/11. Here the notch is clearly visible. You can see just how flat the top is. You take a look at a photo of the same tree from about the same angle from before 9/11. You'll see that the top of the tree is bushy, and there's the bushy tree. Now we're going to take a look at the lamppost impacts. Before looking at the lampposts that were impacted at the Pentagon, we're going to take a look at a vehicle impact of a lamppost that was someplace else. The lamppost was, in this case here, is going to be a truck's going to hit it. It's going to be severed at the base, which is the thickest and strongest part of the mast. You'll see that the mast is crushed and deformed. There's a severed area similar to the damage we'll see with the Pentagon lamppost. The lamp is disconnected at the top and falls kind of separately and kind of falls in place. Minimal damage to the impacting truck wheel area, suggesting that even though this large mass or this large pole mast was destroyed, it is not going to destroy the truck terribly. And you can also imply from that the damage to the wing of the 757 would have been potentially not catastrophic. So the first thing I want to mention is that after severing the two masts and impacting the vehicle front is intact. What we see here is highlighted in red. This is the lamp. The light piece, the light at the top, is falling separately and in about the place where it had been. As the pole got whacked and jerked around, this piece just fell separately. We'll see that something similar happened to many of the other light pole pieces. We can see it falling. You can see it falling. And then if you take a look at the front of the car, even though it's whacked a couple of these things, it's still okay. And we can see the vehicle is almost kind of drivable even afterwards, although I think it's pretty injured. There are 5 lampposts that were impacted. One was only bent, indicating an impact by a wing tip. 4 were severed. The lampposts 1 and 2 will be analyzed in the Chapter 9 Lloyd England accident scene. Lamppost 1 was severed into 3 pieces, potentially suggesting that it was impacted by the engine cowling, as opposed to just the wing. The lampposts 3 and 4 were severed into 2 pieces. So the lamppost impacts, we've just tried to kind of highlight where they were to take a look at how strongly they would have been impacted. The light post number 2 is the furthest to the outside, and possibly was only hit by the very wingtip, and it of course is just knocked a little bit north and directly north out of the way. 3, 4, and 5 are severed, as we'll see. Mast parts 1 and 2 for lamppost number 1 are shown here. The mast part 1 is the big thing. That's 20-some feet long. Mast part 2 is about a 5-foot section, and that is separate. And then there's actually a third piece of it, the top foot or so, is still connected to the lamp support arms, and that is in the fog line, which can be seen in other photos. Lamp post number 2 has been knocked down. It's been bent, but it's not been severed. That means it could not have been a direct impact. Only a glancing blow from the end of the wing. Here's a couple of, right under where it was located are the lamps and one of the upper arms. We'll talk about the location of the lamp support pole number 2 and where that likely ended up. Lamp post number 3. Here's a photo of it from a distance. You can see the severed mast in this photo. It's mostly what people talk about when they talk about the lamp post number 3. Here's a picture of lamp post number 3 on the day of 9/11 from one of the first handheld video cameras. But this is a close-up of it, and you can see that it's basically been severed, and that the severed and twisted, and you can see the lamp, and the tent in the back is actually visible in a Jocelyn Augustino photograph from about September 16th or 17th, something like that, in this area. So I had to make sure I had the right pole and could explain what that tent was, but that's where it was located. And you see the south parking in the background there. Lamppost number 3. Lamppost number 4 has also been severed. What you see here is the long base, and then leaning up against the fence post is, or the guardrails, is these lamp support arms. This is another photo, and you can see the lamp support arms leaning up against the wall. People said that some people have speculated that the lamps could have been knocked down overnight or set in place, but people would have seen this stuff sticking out. They would have seen the lamp mast 3 that we just looked at previously as they're driving to the office, so they could not have been just put there the night before. Lamppost number 5 is seen here in this photo as the first truck is arriving. Here is lamppost number 5 next to the sidewalk from one of the first handheld videos of the Pentagon on 9/11. And then this is another picture of it later on.